Hello, Doug. How are you? You're the first comment this evening. You know, I've got to go get something. Okay, here we are, 1:45. Hello, hello. I'm doing fine here, Jekyll Island, Georgia. And Michael Cobra is here, Harry Rundell. Hello, Dave, Doug, and fellow Augies from Harry AC3EK in Middle River, Maryland. And crazy. You'd think if they put a microprocessor in the Kleenex box, you wouldn't have to restart the box so much. Or maybe you would. Every time. So, hello everybody. I'm Dave Casler, amateur radio call sign KE0OG, here in southwestern Colorado, about 10 miles north of Ridgeway, saying hello to everybody on a day that's been a combination of drippy and not. We had a little rain yesterday, none measurable today. The barometer's a little high, 60 outside with 38% humidity. And the max temperature was at 6 something this morning. That's strange. Spent much of the day today working on the RV, fixing up some things in there that needed fixing up, and making it a little bit better because we are going to Dayton, Ohio this year. And we take off next week, and we'll be there for the long weekend, the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I guess it's actually 2 3/4 day, or 2 6/10 day, or something like that, because they close sort of midday on Sunday. But the vendors kind of start packing things up, a little bit early, because they can detect, people who buy things are going to buy them mostly on Friday. Still a lot on Saturday and not very much on Sunday. So the biggest booth there will be probably DX Engineering. From what I understand, they're going to send every one of their people from their store in Talmadge, Ohio, down to Dayton. A good thing to do. And I've found their people to be friendly and extremely knowledgeable. They're all DXers and contesters and stuff like that. Ham Radio Outlet will also have a very large booth. And of course, Yaesu, Kenwood, and ICOM always have large booths. And I have heard rumors Kenwood is going to announce something. We'll see when we get there. So this little camera that you see right there is a little Panasonic camera on top of a selfie stick. And I'll probably be taking that, hopefully recording something or other to give you kind of a feel for what goes on at Dayton. It's big. There were 33,000 people there last year, and it was just huge. And so I'm looking forward to it. I mean, it's a big event. I'm not sure I will do the flea market this year. Now, if you are there and you see me, please stop me and say hi. We'll do a selfie together or something. I'd love to talk to Augies and those who have not yet subscribed. And maybe, we can kind of share experiences and have a good time. I can ask questions like, what's the most interesting thing you saw? Or what did you buy? Or something like that. All right. This morning, of course, in Rome, they announced a new leader of the Catholic Church, a new pope. And that was quite exciting. I watched a fair amount of it live. As I got up in the morning and got to my computer, it was just as he came through the curtains. Of course, I don't understand either Italian or Spanish, so I don't know quite what he said, but it's was, full of all the usual pomp, circumstance, and pageantry. And a lot of very happy, joyful people out there. I was quite surprised to see that they made the selection in 2 days. And our first American Pope. So there we go. All right, let's take a look at the comments and see how we're doing. For those of you who are joining for the first time, this is just our weekly chance to chat. And I'll try to answer questions that you put in the comments if I can. I have the overhead camera working, so we can use the whiteboard if we need to. By the way, my computer, the thing that was keeping it from upgrading to Windows 11 turned out to be not the little security disk, but the method of doing the indexing on the C drive. And it was, can't even remember the name of it, but it was Master Boot Record or something like that. And they had to change it to something else. So I found on the, on YouTube 2 commands that had to be executed from a DOS window in administrator mode that took that C drive and reformatted the indexing of it to the correct kind of indexing. And with great trepidation, I went ahead and did it. The first time I tried to reboot, it didn't. So I took the power all the way off and rebooted again, and this time it came up. And about 2 days later, Microsoft upgraded it to Windows 11. So now doing Windows 11. Got an interesting error on OBS. It was saying that I have 2 cameras. I've got this normal view, and I've got the overhead, which points at the whiteboard, which is right here. There is a third camera, the so-called teleprompter, but I got an error that says not enough USB resources to bring that camera in. So, I don't know, learning new things about the computer every day. Let's see, we've been putting out all kinds of videos. I put one out today, which should be out. It is on a new battery that I got from Golden Mate. For the past year, up until about August, September, October, somewhere in there, I'd been using a lithium-ion battery that I had from Golden Mate as my main station battery, and it's charged with solar power. So the station has been solar powered for a year. I thought for a while about trying to put the amplifier on that, since the amplifier runs on 12 volts, but I haven't yet. And then another company, Power Queen, something like that, sent me the equivalent battery. So that one is now in place, getting its 1 year checkout. And so I have this old 1 year old Golden Mate battery, and then I have the new Golden Mate battery, which has Bluetooth built in. Who would have thought that your battery would have Bluetooth in it? But it was really hard for me to get that thing to work because there's just too many Bluetooth things in the room, I think. So anyway, it's back in the other room. My goal right now is to put it in the RV. The RV has 140 amp hours of 12 volt, and I think they're AGM batteries that are in there. They're certainly sealed. And the lithium-ion battery is only 100 amp hours, but you get all 100. You can take the battery all the way down, whereas it's not a good idea to do with lead acid. You can damage the batteries by doing that. So this thing apparently will withstand 5,000 complete cycles from full to empty to full to empty and so on. So we'll see how that works. Now the problem is that the charger that's in the RV that keeps the battery charged is designed for a lead acid battery. So I have to change that to one that will charge a lithium-ion battery. Plus there's another problem too, in that when I'm driving, the engine is trying to charge the RV's battery also. And you turn that around, and the lithium-ion battery's normally sitting at about 13.3 to 13.5 volts, and that's higher than your lead-acid battery, which is normally sitting, when it's being recharged. They only recharge it to 13.6. So I don't know. I'm told the two are incompatible. So I need to get a new charger. I took the electrical panel apart today, and there is a discrete charger in there for charging the battery. It's not two-way. It's just one way, 110 to charge the battery. Our last RV had a reverse that would take the 12 volt to 110, but it would only do it for a few objects in the RV, particularly the television. It would do the television, and that was about it. So I'm thinking that 100 amp hours is not a lot of capacity. It will run the heater overnight. That's important. A propane heater. And the water heater on that is strictly propane. I was wondering why the exhaust vent for the water heater looks so black. It was like it was emitting smoke or something. And I found out there's a little slider in there that sets the air intake for the thing, and it was just loose. It was just rattling around in there. So I watched another video on YouTube, went out, took a look at the thing, and set the thing where it seemed like the flame was blue without any yellow in it. We'll see how it works, because we're going to take off this next week. So there likely will, well, no, for certain there will be no live stream next week, because at that same time, Loretta and I will be at an ARRL dinner for what they call Legacy Circle or something like that, because I'm remembering ARRL in my will. So that's going to be, I'll be there. We'll be in the Wright-Patterson Air Force Museum in the so-called presidential wing, where they have several of the old Air Force Ones sitting in there. Of course, today's Air Force One is a 747, and I don't think it would fit in there at all. So, but Harry Truman's first plane was a Lockheed Constellation or something like that. I remember walking through, this is an interesting story. When I was first in the Air Force, I was sent off to Wright-Patterson for a course, a 1-week-long course for second lieutenants who were in charge of maintenance outfits to teach them, you know, here are the regs, that sort of thing. And I went down to the Air Force Museum, and I had almost no time left. And there was a sergeant there who says, "Lieutenant, come back at 5 o'clock. So I went back at 5 o'clock, and he took me not into the museum, but took me to a hangar on the other side of an apron there, and in it was Harry Truman's Air Force One. And I got to walk with him through that airplane and saw an old Hallicrafters S-20R, which is that gray radio up there, blue-gray radio, is a Hallicrafters S-20R. And he showed everything to me, and it's interesting that Harry Truman would pick that particular radio to be his shortwave receiver for commercial shortwave or shortwave broadcast band type of thing in there. Anyway, I get to go through it. The next time I went through it, it was in where it was supposed to be, but everything was plexiglassed off. So you couldn't actually touch, see, or feel any. Well, you could see, but couldn't feel it. So there we go. Okay, good evening to Dave and all Augies from Doug, KD4NC in Kennesaw, Georgia. Hello, Doug. Bill Myers, KE0OG. Good evening, Dave and all Augies. Hello, Bill. Michael Cobra. Hello, Dave. And I'm actually doing pretty good. Had kind of a wacko fall on Friday. No, not Friday, Sunday, and bumped my head. And I've been a little bit less than steady on my feet, but I'm still doing a lot better than I was a few months ago. I've lost 50 pounds, so I don't have this 50-pound pack on my front here, which means my back feels a lot better too. But I've kind of hit a plateau on losing weight. For the last month, I've been about 213, but that's from 266, so it's down quite a ways. Anyway, my wife has been having terrible back problems, but she's been kind of moved along the Medicare chain to where now she has a back brace, which is really helping. And she saw her doctor today and said that we will have to stop frequently on the trip so she can get out and walk around a little bit. Of course, if we have to, she can walk around in the RV, but not a good idea when moving. We will be taking a slightly different route. Last year we had to go all the way to Grand Junction to pick up I-70 and then took that all the way to Lyman. Now US 50 is open and we can take that, go through Pueblo and come up at Lyman. So the first day will be without freeways, so except when we cross I-25. It's a little bit slower. It'd probably be 65, but the thing is, those RVs, they tell you, drive them at 65. It doesn't matter if the speed limit says 80. Drive it at 65. They're trucks, after all, and they're fully loaded trucks with all the stuff on them, and we shouldn't be pressing the engine. So we'll see how things go. As you know, I had a lot of trouble We had last July, had to get a new engine in it. And we had some trouble with some check engine lights when we took it over to Moab, I think around Christmas time. And, oh, that ended up being a mess. But fortunately, the engine was under warranty, so the Jasper, which is the company that rebuilds these engines, sent the parts over, had them put in, and then reimbursed me for the labor for that. They had to do some other things too, and I'm supposed to have this, protection from Good Sam for these kinds of issues, but I haven't seen a penny out of them. I do have a form to fill out to, file a reclama, but we'll see how that goes. Anyway, so we did a trip over to Blanding last month as a shakedown cruise to make sure everything worked, and we discovered a few things we needed to work on. The heater in that thing has a little switch called a sail switch that detects whether the fan is blowing. And if the fan is blowing, it closes the switch, allowing the burner to come on. It wasn't allowing the burner to come on, so I bought 2 sail switches online on Amazon. They look a little different from each other. The first one I put in didn't work, so I measured it with my multimeter, and it said that when it was closed, it was 10,000 ohms. When it was open, it was infinite. And that's not right. So I put the other switch in, which reads very near 0 ohms when it's closed, and of course, infinite when it's open. And the heater works fine, so that's good. Today, I went out and adjusted the water heater, gas propane thing. We're just a bunch of little things. Now, one thing that we had trouble with was the backup camera. Somehow the backup camera got full of water, and it was just a blurry mess. So we took a risk, my YouTube assistant and I, and took the thing down, opened it up all the way, including unscrewing the lens, to very thoroughly dry it. And it worked. Now, when we put it back up, we had to really carefully adjust that lens because it wasn't... I had tried a little trick with nail polish. I put some nail polish on there so it would show me just where the lens would go when it went in, but didn't work. So we ended up having to... I was sitting in the driver's seat, the engine off, but the transmission in reverse, and my YouTube assistant on the other end of a walkie-talkie adjusting that lens until we had the best we could get. So, I mean, it's not perfect, but, and I had to pay my assistant a fair amount to get that thing fixed, but I will tell you that it would have cost a great deal more money to get it done at the dealer. Okay. Let's see. Dale Myers says, greeting from Jekyll Island, Georgia. Harry says, hello, Dave, Doug, and fellow Augies. From Harry AC3EK in Middle River, Maryland. Mark French says, hello, Dave, Doug, Dry. Good evening, Harry. Asa Gage, whoops. I just slipped past a whole bunch here. Let's see. Asa, hello from 30,000 feet above the earth somewhere. Well, hello. I hope the internet is working for you. I'll wave to you. Wave to me as you go over Colorado. I'm in one of those flyover states. Ralph Leland, hi Dave and everyone. K4TA, Fork Union, Virginia. Leo Gustafson. Dave and all Augies, KK7CLY, checking in from Albany, Oregon. Larry Fields, good morning from Manila in the Philippines. Brett Smith, Grapevine TX as well, Texas. Natalie Batista, hello Dave and Augies. Very warm here in Davenport, Iowa. Well, we're going to go right past there next week. Pete Dayton's channel. Pete Dayton, KON4IRD. Either the O shouldn't be there or the N shouldn't be there. Hope you are in good health. I am. I'm doing pretty well. Stephen, WW5V, Fort Worth, Texas. Leo, I see the icon PW2 is now up to $5,600. Is that the amp? Yeah, and it's only 1,000 watts. It's not 1,500. And you can get very excellent amplifiers for less money. ACOM makes some very good ones. There are other people out there that make very good ones. You can get tube. Transistor ones are still pricey. When the price of the transistor amps finally comes down to parity with the tube amps, I think, will disappear. Okay, because tubes are hard to get. I mean, for years, we were using iMac tubes, and they've stopped making their amateur line. So you have to get the tubes from Bulgaria, which are not quite as powerful as the ones that we got from iMac. So, and plus, of course, a linear amplifier made of tubes is pretty inefficient, although, of course, Class A amplifier made with transistors is also inefficient. Now, you could make a Class D amplifier and fix it up so that it would pretend to be a Class A amp, and that's probably what will happen. I know in the QRP Labs kits, like the QMX and so on, the output transistors actually output a square wave, and they pulse modulate the width of the wave, and then they push it through a low-pass filter. Now, the low-pass filter takes out the second harmonic and on up, leaving you with the fundamental frequency, a nice sine wave, undistorted. Because remember, square waves are made up of the original frequency plus all the odd harmonics. Excuse me for a second. Now that's actually quite interesting, because if you run a Class E or D like that, it makes for an extremely efficient amplifier. The transistors are either on or off, and the only time they're dissipating any energy is when they make the crossover. Because when they're fully on, there's very, very, very little voltage drop. When they're off, there's very, very, very little current. So it's just one of those weird things to look at. And you'll start seeing them doing something like that in these amplifiers to make them more efficient. Need a cough drop here. So, yeah, you can look at some of the other amplifiers. They'll be at Dayton. There's a bunch of companies that make them. And ACOM, I think, is one. Now, I know Elecraft makes a full 1,500 watt amp, but anything Elecraft is pricey. Elecraft and, oh, what's the other software-defined radio, fully software-defined, made in the U.S., Flex Radio. Their market is hams who are price insensitive, meaning hams who don't really care what they pay. I mean, it's not, anything is within their budget kind of thing. So they get these things like the amplifier, I think the KP4 or something, I don't know. I may be thinking of the wrong thing, but Elecraft and Flex do these, and they're very good. They're very good. The Elecraft is often considered by many to be the best equipment you can buy, and it is often seen in the various de-expeditions will take Elecraft equipment with them. So it gets a good name for that. Sometimes they will even donate, or I should actually say loan, the equipment. Some DX people who go to these little faraway countries will find a few local hams over there, bring them in to the expedition, teaching them how to use the equipment, and then the de-expedition will leave the equipment behind so that these people have good first-class equipment and they can get on the air more and do things like that. So let's see. Grapevine, Texas. Davenport, Iowa. Pete, Dayton. Stephen, WW5V, Fort Worth. I see the ICOM PW2 is now up to $5,600. I wouldn't be surprised. Now, this tariff thing is going to affect us. And when I am in Dayton, I will talk to the ham radio outlet, DX Engineering, all of these people, and ask them, what's this going to do? Now, over the long term, you'll see a little bit more American manufacturing, but I don't think much, because the market in the ham radio has got some very established players. And, you know, the Yaesus and Kenwoods, their top-of-the-line radios are truly the best they can make. Now, you would say, how can they afford to do all that R&D when they've just got a ham radio market? And their entire market for the new ICOM top of the line might be 2,000 radios. Well, they can't, and they don't. What they're doing is they're putting that technology into their other radio lines. They're using the ham community kind of as beta testers and getting all the feedback, because hams know how to respond. You know, my third order IMD is 3 dB short of your advertisement. Why? This type of thing. Whereas the average user of these things just uses them. Now, there are companies out there, Harris Racal, that's RACAL, I think, make HF equipment for the U.S. government. And the, you know, they've got receivers where they suck up the entire HF band from multiple, I'm guessing actually at this, multiple places around the world, so they can reconstruct anything that happened on HF. HF equipment is simple. So if you've got some sort of a revolution going on somewhere in Africa, they're probably communicating over HF radio. Okay, that's the only way they can get the distance. If you go to a satellite phone or Starlink or something like that, they're too easily tracked and monitored and so on and so forth. In fact, one of the problems that the Ukrainians have run into is when they use Starlink, the Russians have missiles that home in on that frequency. They'll just go right down the bore sight. So you have to use it and then move it, which is a bit of a problem, of course. This goes all the way back to World War II. There was a German beam signal that went out over England. And if you followed the beam, you were on one side of it, it would react one way. You were on the correct side of it, it would react the other. And so they could very accurately navigate to where they wanted to go, depending on where that beam. Well, obviously, such a thing is easily subject to interference. There is, I guess, still is, an FAA type of thing where if you're on the wrong side of the beam, you hear A's. If you're on the other side of the beam, you hear N's. So the dot and dash go backward. When you're right on the beam, you hear da, 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 da. If it starts to get da, you need to go back the other way. So you can do all kinds of things like that. Now the VORs, the variable omni-range, VOR, VHF, omni-range, puts out two signals. One is on a fixed antenna, vertical. The other is, and the beam is formed electronically now. Didn't used to be, but the other has a this is the old way of doing it, a rotating antenna on the same frequency. And what you would do in the aircraft is look at the phase difference between the two signals, because that was exactly the heading from the VOR to you. So if it was 15 degrees off, that meant you were receiving from something that was 15 degrees off of magnetic north. Everything in aviation is magnetic north, which is a problem because it's moving pretty fast right now. But they started to take these out with GPS coming in, but then the Army is using GPS spoofing and jamming as part of its exercises. And this has caused real issues for some commercial aviation. So the FAA suddenly stopped taking those out because those don't get interfered with in the Army's exercises. Okay, let's see. Howdy y'all from Ham Radio QRP. Manticore, hi Dave. This is Doug. I've been corresponding with him. Thanks for your advice about a small paddle to work mobile. Yes. Don Zed says, good evening, Dave. Hope to meet you in Xenia. I hope so too. And Don Zed said, got a deal on my 705 last year in the last hour on Sunday at Dayton. Yeah, they don't want to carry those boxes back. They'd be happy to let them go. Okay, Bill Myers, Cam Radio QRP. Hi, Kevin. Natalie, the tariffs are going to make ham radio an even more expensive hobby. You should look at some other hobbies, like flying, for example. My little time, which was too little, insufficient time, with aviation, led me to the belief that it was approximately 10 times, a full order of magnitude more expensive than ham radio. I got a little instrument from Garmin, a G5, which will operate either as an artificial horizon with various other information, or if you push a button, it turns into the equivalent of a gyro compass without the disadvantages of the gyro compass. And a beautiful little thing. Whenever I had to do turns, I would use that rather than the real compass, because the real compass acts weirdly when you're turning, because you're putting in an acceleration on that magnet, which causes it to read out incorrectly until the acceleration stops and you end up going in a straight direction again. It'll finally come over to where it should be. So I much preferred the G5. The G5, it's like this big, okay, that big. And it was $5,000 for certified aircraft, but if you wanted to use it in an uncertified aircraft, you could get it for only $2,500. Yeah, I didn't pay that for my ICOM 718 or ICOM 7300, I'll tell you that. You know, a lot of hams think 250 is expensive, and these people wanted $2,500, which I ended up forking over because I needed a good, reliable instrument in there. I had airspeed, I had, you know, the climb, rate of climb, and all these other instruments in there, but none of them were, quote, certified instruments. And I knew what I was getting with the G5 was, I mean, the instrument probably cost Garmin less than $1,000 to make. So they made lots of money either way. But it's a truly certified, or shall we say certifiable, aviation instrument, and I wanted at least one of those in there because the G5 would also give you heading and pitch up and down, the altitude and the speed in airspeed in knots, or yeah, it was in knots. I couldn't figure out how to turn the thing back to miles an hour. So everything else in the aircraft was miles an hour. But I did want one good instrument in there. And it was down on the dash down here, and I had to look at it like this to see it. But you could tell from the artificial horizon in there, which was a true gyroscopic artificial horizon plus accelerometers. So there wasn't any wiggle or stuff like this. It was just dead on. And I could just glance at that and see where I was. And, you know, if I ever had any indication of loss of orientation, glance at that instrument, fix it, and trust the instrument. I learned very early when I was still in the Air Force. I started taking flight lessons. Didn't get very far because the instructor was horrible. Anyway, he put me up, it took me up, and he would change the orientation of the aircraft and ask me what the orientation of the aircraft was, and then have me open my eyes, and it would be wildly different from that. So the thing I learned from that is something that stuck with me all my life. Trust the instruments, not your body. The human body is designed for a two-dimensional surface. Okay? Aircraft are designed for a three-dimensional area. Okay? So don't trust your body when you're in an aircraft because a turn can simply feel like a upward acceleration where you get a little G-force or something like that. By the way, if you turn the aircraft over to 60 degrees, that's 2 Gs. Although I've done it several times, I didn't feel anything special. Okay, yes, ham radio prices are going to change. How they are going to change, I don't know. China is the big company that the news people and everybody else talks about for negotiating tariffs. People are not talking about the Japanese. Now, that means there's an additional 10% tariff or something. We'll find out. Okay, KJ5GVQ. The Raw Ham says, good evening all. Ham Radio QRP. Hi, Bill. Larry Fields had 3 days of needed rains and strong Thor dancing. Wish we had a major vendors groups here. Yeah. Well, there are a few really big Hamfests. There's Hamvention, of course, in Dayton. Then there's one in, is it in Arkansas? And one in Florida. Florida is the Sun and Fun version of it. And those three are the real big ones. And then abroad, the big one is Friedrichshafen in Germany. It's on my bucket list to go there someday. We'll see if I ever do that. Okay, let's see. Tim Backus, WB7ORB, Tim in Tucson watching. Imagine it's a little warm down there. Chris Wilson, greetings from the Antipodes, from Victor Kilo 2, November Alpha Papa, in the land down under. Welcome. Ham Radio QRP, hi Richard. Leo Gustafson, it's just as well that amplifier is out of reach. I'm seeing many configuration failures from a forum I belong to. Oh boy, it's easy to do. I will tell you it's easy to do. Thank goodness for the automatic ability of this amplifier to trip off if something goes wrong. There's a knob I have to turn on the front of the amplifier, 40, 20, or 15. 3 different positions. Okay? And if I get that wrong, the thing just drops out. Now, newer versions of that amplifier are, quote, automatic band switching. This one is too old to be upgraded to the new one. There was MFJ, everything now is in the past tense. There was a board you could put in there that would upgrade it to the new one, and then you had to put the RF sensing board on top of that. And the conversion board was as expensive as the mod to put the automatic band switching in, so that never happened. This is one of the original old amplifiers. It's a transistor amp, and it works great. The last time I used it, I talked to a guy, Seychelles, something like that. It was off the eastern coast of Africa, out where the pirates are and stuff like that. Glad you got some good rains. We were supposed to get some good soaking rains, but did not. And we're in drought conditions here. Let's see, Chris Wilson. Oh, yeah, okay. Camry, hi, Richard, Liam. Bill Myers, KE0OG, adds $10 to the chat revenue. Thank you very, very much for that. This comes in handy when I go to Dayton. It really does. Thanks for all of your advice, your Ask Dave column, and your encouragement along the way. Well, thank you very much, Bill, and I greatly appreciate the $10 added to the budget here. Okay, so we've got KJ5GVQ, the Raw Ham. Hey, Kevin. Michael Cobra, greetings from Utah, from KC0BRA. Neil Marsh, W7NRM, good evening from Mount St. Helens country. I have heard or read that there's some sort of a volcano offshore. Now, this is the Pacific subduction zone. You've got the plate that's under the Pacific Ocean is going down under the North American plate, and that slip and slide thing right in there is creating astronomical quantities of heat, which melts the rock, and if it's melted enough, it goes up and becomes a volcano. And they're saying that this thing is expected to explode any time. Well, yeah, I've heard that before. So we'll see what really happens. It'll be very interesting, and I imagine you guys will get an enormous tsunami if that happens, depending on whether when it blows up, it takes the water with it, causing the water to come back into it like this. This is why when they had the Tongan volcano, there wasn't much in the way of a tsunami, because by the time everything was said and done, the seafloor had sunk quite a bit. Now, what happens in volcanoes and tsunamis is that the seafloor suddenly rises. And so that pushes water out in all directions. And it can go around the world, and does. They had that big tsunami a while back that got all the way to Africa. And it was really something. Okay, KJ5GVQ, the Raw Ham, this is my first time. Greetings, welcome. A lot of good people here. Now again, as I said, the purpose of this event is to just chat. You got questions, we can just talk back and forth, and I'll see what you guys have to say, and we'll keep at it. Been toying with the idea of Zoom. Zoom costs money. Not a huge amount of money, but now it's free, but you only have a 40-minute meeting. And I don't know how many people they will allow into the meeting. Right now we have 92 concurrent viewers, and that's at about the limit. They limit at 100 for the first level of paid. So I don't know, we'll have to think about this, what we can do. Leo says, hi, Neil. The Happy Hogger. Wouldn't have anything to do with motorcycles, would it? Randy, ND9G, watching from Indiana. Leo Gustafson is there. People are saying hello to each other. Harry Rundle, congrats on the Windows 11 upgrade. Yeah, I had been so worried about this TPM chip. Some kind of, I don't know, it was cryptographic signature for something. I don't know. Well, it turned out it already had it. It wasn't turned on, and somehow I managed to accidentally turn it on in the firmware. So, great. But I had that problem with the master boot record versus something else on the C drive. Well, the C drive on this thing is a solid state drive. About 2 terabytes. And so when I typed that command, it was mpt2 something, something, something. And then there were some slashes and stuff like that that you had to put in there. When that thing was running, I was just like, what am I doing to myself here? But it all worked out okay. And the only thing I've seen, now the computer that my assistant uses is Windows 11. My laptop that I use while traveling is Windows 11. So it made sense to me to see if we couldn't get this thing up to Windows 11, which I think probably means that it'll be okay for Windows 12, which people are starting to talk about now. So, okay, let's see. Oops, Andy Leo. Let's see. Hello from Far West, Missouri. Glenn is using his wife's user ID. 73 degrees, 28% relative humidity. Sounds very pleasant. Still on Windows 10, and it had an upgrade and stopped working. I would log on, but kept asking me to log on again. That's no fun. Since the Win 11 update, Office is no longer functioning. Well, I want you to update that too, of course. Ham radio with N2. By the way, I don't use Office. I use LibreOffice, which is the old Open Office that forked. Open Office has kind of sort of died. Oracle is supposed to be maintaining it, and I don't think they are. But LibreOffice is actively maintained, and that's what I use. I don't use Word for anything. If I get a PowerPoint presentation, I can open it in LibreOffice. Not always perfectly, but okay. Ham radio with N2FET said hello, everyone. Larry says, my son, too, the CPU to a shop to get rid of the upgrade. Really? Wow. Chris Wilson, I'm surprised how many hams aren't using Linux. I'd expect with our personality type, we would be embracing the DIY nature of open source software. I tried to dive into the Raspberry Pi. There's a lot of ham radio software written for the Raspberry Pi, and I was utterly lost. Utterly lost. The problem with Linux is if you want to do something simple, there are 7 different distributions that will do that. each with different command lines and everything like that. And there are actually several different current versions of Linux. And of course, IBM took over Red Hat, which is one of the versions, but you've got all these other versions, and they're all slightly different. And my poor old brain likes to be able to just sit down and have it just work. Now, mind you, I get under the covers a lot more than my wife does. She has an Apple. But it turns out the mayor of Ridgeway is also the local Apple repairman. And so people go to him with their Apples if they had trouble. And, you know, there's a lot of things I can't help Loretta with. I mean, she's on the network and all that, and that works fine. But when my assistant, when we first got him the good computer, he was wondering why it took so long to transfer files. And we finally figured it out. He was trying to do it wirelessly. So we turned off the wireless in his computer, got under the house, ran a cable from this bedroom to that bedroom, and plugged it into the computer and right directly into the 20-segment switch or something. I've got a pretty nice switch. And suddenly, poof, everything got a lot faster. Now, the drives that are used for our work are in USB drives on my machine. But he can still render, using my machine's drives, he can render faster than I can. And that's because his machine's a little more powerful. I was doing some rendering yesterday for the video that went up today on that battery, and I was kind of tracking, and I was rendering at about 10 times real time. So in other words, a 10-minute video would be rendered in 1 minute. That's pretty doggone good for video editing software. So I like that. And whereas he was using the old laptop, it was an HP gaming laptop, so it was supposed to be really nice. Well, it was just a regular laptop with a little bit of window dressing on it. See, okay, let's see. Michael Cobra, many flavors of Ubuntu that they would love runs on old computers like a monster. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Somewhere I've got an old Win95 machine. And I would like to get that back up as a server for the weather machine here. Ham radio with N2 FET, studying for my extra at 12, which I thought would be interesting to tell you all. Well, very good. My videos that go along with the extra book are on the they're in the ARRL Learning Center. Now, the tech videos are outside the paywall. They are on the ARRL's YouTube page. But the general and extra videos are in the Learning Center. They're free if you're a member of the league. And now I will just point out that if I were still selling those on little thumb drives, I sold an awful lot of thumb drives back before making the transfer to the league. It cost you about as much for the thumb drive as it would to get your membership in the ARRL. So it's mucksnicks, whichever way. Also, I have a picture somewhere on my phone. When I filled up my Jeep, it cost me more for that fill up than a year's membership in the league. So, without, of course, the printed magazines. But into FET, good luck to you. Congratulations that you're doing it. And if you have questions, drop me a line. Leo Gustafson, Chris, my ham clock runs Linux. Does that count? I think he's running the Windows version, is what he's saying. Doug Dry saw a load of patron messages on new videos. Haven't had a chance to watch them yet. I've been migrating to new phones, to the new Pro Max for himself and his wife to get ahead of the tariffs, yeah. I think Apple has several million of those phones in its vaults in California. Now, oh yeah, we put up all new videos, although I didn't today. I did it for those who have, quote, joined the channel members. But it's my assistant who knows how to do that for Patreon and how to tell the PayPal people that they can go to this unlisted video and all that sort of thing like that. So if you are supporting the channel financially, you get everything as soon as it's uploaded. Now, it could be uploaded for release a month out, but you'll get it. Now, some days we upload a great deal. Like shorts, shoot, we might upload 15, 20, 30 of them in a day, and you get access to them all. Whereas the others are just sort of metered out. So I know that we're through the end of May with uploads and shorts. We do, I think, 3 shorts a week and 3 normal format a week. And I'm thinking we can use that extra day a week for anything that comes along that's extra. My thing for today, I think I may have released 2 videos today. I'm not sure, but I did release the one on that battery. Now, one I want to do tomorrow, because I need to do this before I leave. This is a new Retevis product. It is not a ham radio. It's GMRS. It's a Retevis C2, and it's designed for GMRS. Now you say, well, what good is that to me? Well, I think GMRS is what CB was supposed to be, not what it turned out to be. You still do need to get a license for GMRS. The only thing you have to do to get one is pay a $35 fee. In fact, it's on my same FRN, my call sign. I'll get some glasses on here so I can see that far. Is Whiskey Sierra Golf Quebec 881. That's my call sign for GMRS. Now, the thing about a GMRS license, it's not only good for you, but it's good for your immediate extended family. So, you, your wife, your kids, siblings, grandparents, grandchildren, all that sort of stuff can use the same license. So a lot of hunters use these out there because they're real walkie-talkies, and the antennas on them are only like that because it's in the 400 megahertz range up above the amateur bands. And the problem is, I know there's a GMRS repeater around here somewhere, so I got to find some way to test it. But I did test today the spectral purity. And the second harmonic, I think, is a little bit high, but otherwise I think it's okay. And it's certainly okay for a Chinese radio. Most of the Chinese radios come out like that. There was a company, and I don't remember which one, that took a GMRS radio and modified the firmware to get it to work on 2 meters and 70 centimeters. Now, on 70 centimeters, it worked pretty well because the GMRS is like 65 centimeters. I don't know what it is. It's very close. And it worked well on 440, but you put it on 2 meters, and the front end for these things, especially the output circuitry, is tuned for GMRS 460, 470 megahertz. And try and do that on 144 megahertz. the second harmonic was stronger than the fundamental. And I said, do not buy this radio. And so the company sent me its usual thank you note for doing a review. I think, I know that YouTube generally is not allowed in China. And yet all these manufacturers are working with influencers around the globe, okay? Somehow they have to be able to review what these influencers are doing. So I don't know how they do that. But sometimes I wonder if they do it at all. Anyway, okay. Yeah, I use an iMac and it works today the same as it did 6 years ago. Yeah, that's certainly not true on a Windows. Neil Marsh, I'm on a geriatric HP 14N018US running Linux Mint. See, another distribution of Linux. I may switch all my computers over to it if it works. I do believe Truman's plane was named Columbine, which is the state flower of Colorado. I have some beautiful pictures of Columbine. You have to go above about 11,000 feet to see them. They are a spring flower. This is the part of Colorado where it goes from a very long winter to a nice spring summer, which is about 3 months, and then back into winter again. And the columbines come out, and it's the state flower. They're beautiful. Very delicate, very three-dimensional. Okay. Doug Dry says, I've used Macs since I switched from Sun Solaris in the 2000s, but Apple's expensive relatively until this year's Mac Mini M4. Killer fast and cheap. Good upgrade for iMac. Larry Fields, my gout is better, only most of the pain was in my left foot. Been busy reading the Handbook 2013, plan to visit NTC next month. What is NTC? National Technical Committee? Don't know. Phil, KE0OG, hello to all loggies from Kalamazoo, Michigan. I've always loved that name. Dale Myers will look for you in Dayton. Please say hi. I would like everybody, all the Augies, to, if you see me, stop me, say hello. Let's get a selfie, talk a little bit. Helps me get to know you better and, the kinds of things that you're interested in. Most of the questions that I get are, frankly, antennas and grounding. And very few technical questions like, how does an oscillator work? Or something like that. In fact, I had a kit, a whole bunch of stuff from the league. There was a guy who had hands-on electronics or something for a few years. And they put out a kit with all the parts so that you could do that. And I spent quite a bit of time doing a oscillator that the feedback circuit was 3 60-degree phase loops, or phase sections, which brought it around to 180 and caused the oscillator to oscillate. That was really cool design. Did a video about it. Hardly anybody looked at it. So, the viewers are interested in antennas. Some getting on the air kinds of questions like, how do I make sense of single sideband or FT8 or something like that? What band's good at what time of the day? So that's what I've been doing most of my videos about. All of the questions that I use are real questions sent to me by real hams. Okay? And that's really important. Now, the guy I superseded, the guy before me who did the Dr. Is In, is now passed away. In fact, he passed away not long after he did the transition. He just couldn't do it anymore. And so they asked me to pick it up. He said he got so few questions he had to make them up. Well, I don't have that problem. I don't make up questions. These are real questions from real hams. Now, do I edit? Oh, you bet. I try to edit it so it's general enough that other people would be interested. Okay. I try to edit out extraneous, like, something that's what engineers call the dimensions of a doorknob. And this is an old testing technique in engineering classes, is they'll give you a bunch of information and ask you to calculate somebody. And it turns out 2 or 3 of those pieces of information were irrelevant to the calculation. And we always called those the dimensions of the doorknob because nobody cared about the doorknobs. This was extraneous information. So I shorten them, sometimes not. I try to get it down to one question. Sometimes there's more than one. And I've gotten comments where people say, you forgot the most important part of the question. So I try to make sure that I get, the essence of the question. When I was down at Quartz Fest, I asked attendees there to give me questions that they thought I should answer. One of them was, why do contesting? And so I wrote up a response to that, all the benefits of doing contesting. And I got a call from my editor who said, we're going to take that out of your column and publish it in On the Air, which is the beginner's magazine, On the Air under your byline, and we'll pay you for it. So that'll be nice. Now, they said they had no idea when they'd get to it, but it's in there. And I had submitted enough additional material that it pretty much filled out the column. Sometimes there's a little bit of white space left at the end of my column. Drives me nuts. I want to fill it. But sometimes it just happens, QST, unlike the old magazine QST, very different. I was looking at that 1997 QST where I wrote an article on solar power. And I realized that magazine, I looked in there, 220 pages. Today's QST is about 3/4 of that. And less than that, 2/3 of that. And the old magazine technique of saying continued on page 87, they don't do that anymore. Everything has to fit in where it's supposed to go. So I think what they were trying to do, it was a conscious design decision. They've gone with a much larger font. The original font for QST, the older ones there, I think might even have been about a 9 or 10 point, maybe even 9, because it's a lot denser, much, much denser. And nowadays, it's built more for people who flip through magazines, which I will admit that I do with some of my aviation magazines, which follow the same technique largely, by the way. It's just the way people do magazines nowadays. They change. Okay. Let's see. Chuck Schreiber says, good evening, Dave, to all Augies and 5 KVO from the Hill Country of South Texas. Pleasant evening in 64. Leo says, thanks for the detailed information about amplifiers in the Class D. There's a Class E also. Larry Fields and Morning Nets look for QRP check-ins. I dropped my ICOM 718 power to 10 to 5 watts and check in. My 817 turns on but display flashes. Yeah, you've had a lot of trouble with that. Tim Backus, I wish that an MFJ type company would start making cheap stuff for us. I have heard rumors about people who offered to buy MFJs so Martin could have a really good retirement, but he had so many conditions on the sale that nobody would touch it. And so it just disappeared. So all the people who might have lost their jobs had some other company bought it, lost their jobs anyway. And, you know, the company was a little tiny, shaky financial ground toward the end there. I've often said if it were up to me to be the guy who goes in and gets the company back on its feet, I would go through the catalog and eliminate about 9/10 of it. How many different kinds of SWR meters do we need? 2 pages of them? I don't think so. Some of them are like that. And some digital, some dual needle, some otherwise quite like that. And it's like you're trying to put too many things on the shelf. You won't be able to keep up. And, you know, they should have a nice little line of manual tuners, a nice little line of automatic tuners, and not double back on itself. You know, you've got the low power and the high power. I understand that. Now, MFJ tried to sell some Chinese equipment, but found out very quickly that the Chinese work a little differently from the Japanese. If you sign an exclusive distributorship agreement with a Japanese company, that makes you the exclusive distributor. In fact, many, many years ago when Toyota first came to this country, there was one dealer who had distribution rights. He lives over on Sleeping Indian Ranch here. He's filthy rich. And so all the other dealers owed him a fee every time they sold a Toyota. Well, you know, after a while, of course, that had to end, but the guy by then was a multi-millionaire. He has a beautiful home over here. Log, all, you know, everything. But the Japanese companies value the brand name. The Chinese seem to market, they'll market the same radio under 2 different brands. Identical radio, just different name on it. So the branding part of the business is just a matter of finding stuff, putting it in their catalog, and so on. They don't actually make anything. So anyway, Martin Jew made exclusive distributor agreements with Xiegu and some others. And what those turned out to be was you are the exclusive distributor inside your building. Now we're going to go to another building and we're going to have another exclusive distributor. And so Xiegu was selling equipment into the United States at the same time MFJ was trying to build a market for it. It was a disaster for them, and they said no more of those. So they were for a while bringing in Messi Palini cable. That's Italian, and they would follow exclusivity agreements. Now, DX Engineering, I asked the guy in charge of DX Engineering at Dayton one time, I says, do you do just-in-time inventory or do you keep stocked inventory? And he says, I don't do any of that just-in-time crap. I stock. So when somebody calls for something, it's there. And so he ended up, I think it's the last company that sells this nice little antenna that Cushcraft released just before it all went sideways. They still have some because they stocked. And if you can't get something from MFJ, you may very well be able to get it from DX Engineering. If they don't have it, it's probably gone. Now, DX Engineering has taken over some companies. Butternut is one. They sell and service Butternut antennas. And there are some some others out there, and they're making them available. Sometimes I think DX Engineering runs almost like a nonprofit for the benefit of amateur radio type of company, although having talked to these people, I know they're extremely smart businessmen. But they really, all of their salespeople, all of their production people, everybody who works for DX Engineering, which is a subsidiary of their automotive racing stuff, it's a separately thing. They don't cross lines. In fact, they have their own shipping line and everything. And all those people are rabid hams. They're DXers, they're contesters, they're all kinds of, let's get the big stuff and point the beam and drop in the power and let's go. That kind of people, the DX expedition kind of people. And they started out kind of as a place to get hardware for antennas and towers and stuff, and kind of grew from there to be a full service. And now they're taking on very selective few additional things that I think they probably manufacture themselves. Either that or they've got the old plant. I've heard rumors that they made an offer for MFJ, but that is just a rumor. I do not know if that is true. If I come across this guy at Dayton, I'm going to ask him about MFJ. Because I said once, and I still believe, that if MFJ did not exist, somebody would have to invent it. Well, now we're at the point where it doesn't exist, so somebody's going to have to invent it. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, now we're running out of time. I don't want to keep you overtime like I did last time. I miss Heath, Gitz, and Collins. RBH, do Anderson power pole connectors need to be cleaned from time to time? I am seeing more voltage drop on 100-watt transmit and not outputting 100 watts anymore than I did not see when new. Well, there's a kind of, and I've got where have I put it? I got the can down for one of my videos. Where did I put it? Is it up there somewhere? No. Okay. The chemical is called deoxit D5, and it is the classic deoxidizer. Now, aluminum, of course, oxidizes instantly in air, but if you rub the connectors, that generally takes care of it. But those connectors stay there a long ways. They're spring against each other, and you can get oxidation in there. So I made the suggestion that there was this guy who had a problem, and this is going in I think the July issue of QST. He had a problem that sometimes he'd turn his rig on, get everything configured, and he wouldn't hear a thing. And then he'd transmit a single dit, and everything worked. That's because there's corrosion in a connection somewhere. And if you put that little dit, that's just enough power to put a tiny arc through there to make a connection between those two plates. So I suggested to him that he go through from end to end, and I mean radio to antenna, and look at all the connections that are mechanical, such as a coax inserting in, or a switch contact, or anything coax into a lightning arrestor, so on. Go through. Now, you can get a contact cleaner at any auto parts store, but deoxit D5 is the classic. You can use them like on potentiometers, old actual potentiometers that are, got a wiper on a resistive thing. Spray a little in there, go back and forth 20 or 30 times, and the scratchiness goes away. I said, get some of that, get some Q-tips, get some a nice lint-free microfiber cloth and get to work. And every coax connection, everything, all the way through to the antenna, any connections, and this is true at the antenna, oftentimes there are things in there that are just screwed down. Unscrew them, clean them, put them back together. And that is something that, you know, if you are running into this problem where you're getting kind of iffy performance, like from a power pole connector, first of all, if it's more than a watt or two, you'll be able to feel the thing get warm. Okay? If it's not warm, it's probably not a problem. Now, what you should do is take it apart, spray a little contact cleaner in there, put them in and out from each other, stick a little Q-tip in there and just rub on it, make sure you're not leaving a bunch of cotton threads inside, and put it back together and see if that cures the problem. Another thing that could be happening is something's falling out of tune, or the, I don't know. You always have to keep in mind that there could be something that's actually broken in the equipment. So anyway, yes, power pole connectors, like any connectors, if you have, like I've got a coax switch here from Alpha Delta. This is a doggone good coax switch. But every so often, you know, move the handle back and forth, take it apart, clean it out, put it back together easily. Don't over tighten things. But I think that will really help you with that problem. Okay, miss the Drakes. Oh, yeah, I learned on Drake S-lines at Brigham Young University. Really, really, really good stuff. It was a T4 and an R4. And there was some kind of alpha after each one. And, oh, those are nice machines. Wish they had military surplus like long ago. You can still get things surplus, but what happens is they sell them in enormous lots. So the old way it used to be is these radio stores on New York's Radio Row, which is now kind of about where the World Trade Center stands. But these people would go buy lots of lots, L-O-T-S, as in an auction. A lot being sold in an auction, meaning a defined quantity of something. And they would then turn around and sell these mostly to hams. And you could get anything, because the United States, I think, made a conscious decision as World War II was obviously reaching a close. They did not slow down the production cycle. We didn't want to get bit by suddenly running out of enough fighter airplanes to take care of Japan. If we had to invade Japan, we would probably have lost about 500,000 U.S. soldiers and endless treasure in terms of equipment, airplanes, tanks, you name it. So the fact that the Manhattan Project paid off, there's no guarantee that it would when it was started, but the fact that it paid off meant the U.S. didn't have to have a lot of equipment to invade Japan. The thing is, they did, of course. It got to the point in the European War that if a B-17 came back, shot up and stuff, they'd shove it to the side, bring out a new one, and use that one. They wouldn't fix the old ones anymore. They didn't have to. They didn't need to. They had so many new ones. So after the war ended, all of these contracts were terminated, and everything sold for ridiculously low prices just to get it off the government's books. Now, the way Harry Truman paid for World War II was different from the way Britain paid for World War II. Harry Truman paid for World War II with inflation. I mean, we had a certain amount of tax revenue that would go up with inflation because wages went up with inflation and so on. But the war bonds were denominated in wartime currency, which was now worth a lot less because of the inflation. That was a conscious decision on the American government's part. And it was a very good decision because after World War II, there was no austerity in America. The economy just switched from wartime to peacetime overnight. People had jobs, people went to school. One of the best decisions this country ever made was to send its veterans to college. That's how my dad got he got his degree through the Navy, the 12 program, but I got the second half of my bachelor's plus all of my master's paid for by the GI Bill because I'm a veteran of a certain age. They got all that paid for. They've taken it away now, which I think is a terrible way to treat our vets. But be that as it may, in England, they says, oh no, these debts need to be paid properly. If we have to sell the gold in the Bank of England, we'll do that. And they tried to manage without inflation. Immediately, their country went into a nosedive economically because these factory jobs that were lost when they canceled the war production contracts were not replaced with civilian jobs. Rationing persisted in Britain for decades, a few decades. And it wasn't until Margaret Thatcher came along and got a whole bunch of people mad by stepping on their toes that finally got Britain's economy going. And it's going strong now. Not the same way Margaret Thatcher did it, but it's growing strongly now. By the way, the Queen hated Margaret Thatcher because the Queen was worried about Joe factory worker who was having trouble paying rent in some far-flung corner of the empire. And Margaret Thatcher wanted to privatize everything. And the Queen was saying, but so many people will lose their jobs. They had terrible arguments about this. Well, of course, the Queen is someone everybody pays lip service to, but Margaret Thatcher was really the one who had the power. So that's a story from long ago. But anyway, yes, the U.S. and now, the other thing that happened, of course, in Germany, there were a lot of people in the U.S. who thought Germany ought to be bombed back into the agricultural era. It should be an agricultural country without manufacturing. And they did. And we did that to them. We destroyed everything over there. But finally, cooler heads prevailed. And George Marshall kind of did this as a joint project with Truman and Eisenhower. They said the best thing we can do to keep war from breaking out in Europe again is to get their economies back in order. And, oh, by the way, start NATO. NATO was an idea of pan-Europeanism. And they did that. It took years and years and years to finally get those economies going again. And they are powerhouse economies today. Definitely first world. There's nothing third world about Europe. And because of NATO, what does Ukraine want more than anything else? Be part of NATO. Because then NATO would help it fight its war. Poland Poland is a member of NATO. Norway just became the newest member of NATO right after Sweden. Everybody wanted to be a member of NATO. That brings all these people together under a unified command structure. It's kind of hard to go to war with somebody that you sit next to at a table in some planning function somewhere. The Marshall Plan and the NATO succeeded brilliantly. Now, we did the same thing in Japan. It took, again, decades. It used to be that made in Japan was an epithet. You know, what a piece of junk, it was made in Japan. Well, Japan, unlike many people, they look at things very carefully and look for small improvements. And all those small improvements add up to where now if you get a Nikon or a Canon camera, you're getting the best in the world. Now, Hondas and stuff are actually made in this country, but there's no car that doesn't have a part from every country in the world. So anyway, okay, we are past time. We used to use low arc C, Loran C, I think is the name of it. Radio for night navigation on boats and triangulate the signals on maps to find your location. Yeah, there's two. Loran was a navigation aid, and the little direction finders were piloting aids, and the two kind of overlap like this. But you could still buy at Radio Shack when I was a teenager, AM radio that had a direction finding antenna. So you'd get your maps out and you'd be off the coast of California by 50 miles because you heard that fishing was good there. You needed to go back. You get your map out and say, okay, KFI should be over here and KNX should be over here. Okay, a little bit of algebra and this is where we are. And they would navigate all the way home that way. Now, what that kind of navigation did not do was allow piloting in close quarters. And so you'd have to have a pilot come on board your boat or something like that. But what GPS did was it allowed people to actually pilot in completely fogged over harbors without hitting anybody. So that was very nice. Good evening to all you beautiful Americans from Patrick Valdez. Z Alpha Alpha 7F. Assalamu alaikum. Hello, Dave from Riyadh. Oh my, boy, I'd like to get you DX. Welcome from Riyadh. So happy to have you. It's in Saudi Arabia. Endotooth, our dentist. Hello from North Central Alabama. Would you go back to steam gauges? I would. Steam gauges means the original 6 primary instruments. Whereas nowadays you have a unified display. I find those unified displays distracting as all get out. I want to look there for my altitude. I want to look there for my airspeed, you know. And I want to be able to just glance at it. And with the steam gauge, it's got an actual needle on the gauge, okay? Actual needle. You glance at it, you know what, it takes no processing time, and you know what's going on. And then the artificial horizon, which is one of the steam gauges, is your primary instrument because it tells you where you are with respect to Earth. Are you climbing? Are you descending? Are you tilting? What's going on? And if you glance at that, you can immediately make the adjustments to the airplane as long as you haven't already stalled and started to spin. Now, that's a different story. They used to teach spin recovery in aircraft, but there were so many training accidents, they said, you know, we're not going to get any pilots at the end of this if we keep doing that. So they stopped spin training. Basically, a spin requires a stall to start, and then you've got to get this kind of thing. The only flight control that still works in a spin is the rudder. The rudder, which is controlled by your feet. You can wiggle a stick around all you want, and it won't affect anything. You've got to get the rudder going opposite the spin to get yourself out of the spin, and then you're still going down like crazy. You need to actually accelerate so you get out of the stall. Yes, you can be stalled going down, and get that thing back up in the air before the aircraft breaks up in the air. Anyway, flying has gotten too expensive. Yes. Had my Cessna 150 for 51 years and now up for sale. I need ADSB put in, yes. And they wanted $15K for that radio setup. You should get one that is, well, let's see, a Cessna 150 is a certificated airplane, isn't it? So if you could turn that into a light sport somehow, you could probably get an ADSB in there for a whole lot less. I mean, many thousands of dollars less money, but you have to make it a light sport, an experimental aircraft. And that would take some work. ADSB, yes. ADSB, right, B. That was what was throwing me. Okay. Oh, we are out of time. Oh, look at all the many comments. What contests do I run? Field day, for sure. Sometimes I'll do DX contests because that's a great way to talk to new countries. Also, the state KE0OG parties are a great way to talk to some rare states. So the Vermont KE0OG party you want to get involved in because it's a great way of talking to people in Vermont. The editors are getting older. No, they are not. They're getting younger. And nowadays, this is nationwide, all magazines, they're all female. My editor is female, her boss is female, her boss is female. I don't know why, but I noticed that when I tried to sell my first novel 30 years ago, was it? More than 30 years ago? That the agents were becoming all female and the editors who bought books were all female, and it's stayed that way ever since. It's a woman's world. The publishing world is a woman's world. Okay, and I thought it very interesting when monitoring times, your quintessential male geek magazine told you what to listen for, police, fire, whatever, hired on its first female editor. And I went, okay, how does this female editor understand what her entirely male audience wants? Well, obviously she understood it very well. Monitoring Times became a better magazine. Okay. NTC's National Telecommunications, we have to register. Okay, well, very good. I hope that works really well for you. There is the issue of, yes, quality control. MFJ never had a good handle on quality control. Never did. Discord limited, Zoom, we'll have to see what we can do here. Hams are often old men with old eyes. Ever tried to read Wired? Well, I actually do subscribe to Wired, but okay, let's go down here. Now, I think there was only one contribution this evening. That was $10 from somebody. I would like to encourage you, if you can, to just sprinkle a little money on one of your super chats, because those sprays insulate. No, they don't. They're designed specifically. They're not, now, Deoxit does make silicon grease, but that's not D5. D5 is a nasty product. You don't want to get that on you because it eats up the oil and then evaporates, taking the oil with it. Okay, a great way to clean them up. Okay. Anyway, use dielectric grease. Now, what I'm talking about is not a dielectric grease. I'm talking about a contact cleaner. Radio Shack used to sell this. Okay, and they've gone the way of all the earth. I watched an interesting YouTube video on why that happened. Basically, they never made the transition to the online economy. And when they tried, it was too late. Heathkit bought a lot of surplus gear. Well, where do you think the CRTs came from for the early Heathkit oscilloscopes? They were a military surplus. Okay, dielectric grease, but use contact cleaner. USA current debt 37 trillion. Inflation is not out of sight. Inflation, the target for inflation is 2% a year. And we've been above that. For a while in there, we were quite a ways above that. 2% a year is what the Fed thinks will keep employment and inflation in equilibrium. Okay, a little bit of it. Now, there's more people in the U.S. all the time. If you kept the money supply at the same level and you get more people, then every person has less. It makes people poor. So you have to increase the amount of money to match the number of people. And that's a very complicated topic. Now, you want to know what inflation is, you should have seen the Carter years. 14% inflation in 1 year during Carter? Man, that was just crazy. We bought a house when I got out of the Air Force. My interest rate was 13%. By the way, this week, I paid off our house. It's bought and paid for. I paid the last payment plus a little tiny leftover. I went down to the bank, paid it. Sayonara. And John Bray sends $20. Thank you very, very much, John. I appreciate that. Okay, let's call quits till not next week, but maybe the week after. We'll still be traveling the week after. But I have Starlink in the RV, so we might be able to get something going. Okay, so I'm going to say, oh yeah, I've taken my editor, who has just left the ARRL, so now I send my stuff to a new person, also a woman. I got some advice as a new author. It says, don't fight your editors. They know more about it than you do. And so she'll take stuff out of there. Why'd you do that? But I just, whatever you came up with, I review it. I review it one last time. And occasionally I say, now look, this sentence has to say this because it actually means something in engineering to say this. So we're going to have to go back to the verb I used, or something like that. And they're always willing to do that. So they take it, they edit it, they send me basically the proof copy. It would have been a galley proof in the old days, but now it's just a PDF file. I read it, my wife reads it, and we take a look for any issues that might be there. So thank you, all of you. My interest rate in Carter years, but the house was only $50,000. Yeah, and your salary was a whole lot less, too. When my wife and I got out of the Air Force, we went to get our taxes done because we'd bought and sold a house and all this kind of stuff. Between the two of us, we made $50,000. And she was an engineer, too. Okay? Man. Not that way at all. $22 per pound for beef, no inflation. Okay, there are some items, food in particular, that is still going up. Eggs are ridiculous because of the bird flu. This is classic capitalism. Egg prices have gone up because of scarcity. Okay, you can get eggs if you want them. You just have to pay more for them. Now, gasoline has stayed fairly level. It's $3.19 in our area. I'm sure as we go across the country, we'll find all kinds of gas prices. Wages are still going up at about this is a problem, real wages, you know. What is the worth of money? Well, there was a time when we would pay a lot more for a lot less, like a television. When I was a child, my aunt, who was dying of cancer, and this was one of the things she wanted before she died, was a color television with those big round tubes and all that kind of stuff. I was the one that had to go adjust the color for her, because you had to adjust the color to get a reasonable picture. We'd go over every Sunday evening and watch The Wonderful World of Color, which was Walt Disney's program on her color TV. That color TV set them back $560. $560. About 5 years ago, after Christmas, about 10 years ago, I went down to Target and picked us up a new HD 55-inch television. Beautiful thing. For $575. So prices of some things go down. Now, so how do you equate 1955 money with 1965 money, 75, 85, because the prices of everything are up and down relative to each other. It's really hard to do. The Consumer Price Index is the government's way of doing it, but the Consumer Price Index has come under fire because of things it does not include. And I think somebody will correct me on this. Gasoline and food are not included in the Consumer Price Index. So I've paid more than $4 a gallon for gas. I've also paid 18 cents a gallon for gas when I was a teenager and I had a motorcycle and it cost me $0.25 to fill up my tank with gas. That was nice. Can't do that anymore. Anyway, all right. Well, you guys take care, and we'll have some more fun in a couple weeks. So I'm going to say 73 to all of you, and until next week, see you then.